everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Gia. If you are a food or beverage founder, I'm sure you have probably met yourself sit down with a retail buyer and ask the question you really want to know. And today we're doing exactly that. I'm so happy that I have invited my friend, my mentor, and a really respected figure in the CPG industry, Dwight Richmond, to the podcast today. So he spent years shaping what goes on the shelves of the Whole Foods market, fresh market, and now Town and Country, where he is the director of center stores. So he's seen thousands of product pitches. He knows what works, what never works, and what founder always miss when they're pitching a product to a retailer. He's generously agreed to sit down with us today and just pull back the curtain of how retail decisions are made. So Dwight, I'm really excited about this conversation today. And why don't you give us a little bit of intro of yourself? Tell those startup founders, what does a center store even mean?
No, thank you, Gia. It's great to talk to you again, as always. So thank you for doing this. I'm sure this is a huge help to upstart makers and soon-to-be makers and just one right now trying to figure out how to get ahead, right? I've been in the business almost 35 years now, actually. So started in retail, actually, and worked my way up through the ranks, as it were, and have touched a lot of different parts of grocery. I've worked in multiple departments, but the grocery department is where I have now spent the bulk of my career. And again, as you noted, about over half of that was with Whole Foods. You know, center store, every retailer has a different term for everything out there. And most of the terms, usually when you use center store, that refers to grocery, dairy, frozen. So what do you think of literally the middle of the store? Center store usually means everything. Yeah, center store is dairy, grocery, and frozen, and then everything else is sort of excluded. Some retailers also include beer, wine, and spirits in center store. Some don't. We do in our case. Some include like the bulk foods department. Sometimes bulk is in produce. It just depends on the retailer. But generally speaking, we say center store, you're usually referring to grocery. And grocery usually means dairy, frozen, and dry grocery.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. That's pretty much the whole grocery store.
It usually is about 60 to 70% of the actual like footprint of a store. Yeah.
I see. All right. So today we're going to talk about like maybe 3 big modules of things. We wanted to talk about what decisions were made, how decisions are made when retailers are looking for product. So we want to talk about pricing and margins and what retailers are expecting in those, financial figures. And third, we want to talk about how to stay on the shelf. What are the marketing strategies to move velocity? So there's a lot to cover. Make sure you stick to the end. All right. So Dwight, I first wanted to know just the broad stroke of things, like how often do you do category reviews and who's involved in those reviews? Is it like a team decision, or is it like mainly the decision of the category manager?
So again, it kind of varies by retailer, but general rule is a director oversees a team of category managers, assistant category managers, buyers, who then working with that director will break down the categories of what they are assigned to do. Some directors like myself, we hold on to some categories that we like, and we'll manage them too. It's always good. And then category reviews calendars are usually approved by a physician like myself as a director. And then we usually will put that out to the general distributor broker community.
Is that usually once a year or once like 10 months?
Yeah,
or longer?
once a year. Yeah, so
that's for every category, or depending on category?
Not everybody. Like this year, we're not doing every category. We don't have the bandwidth to be able to do it. So there's usually an 80-20 rule that is applied to most of life. And if you work on where 80% of your volume comes from, it's usually 20% of your categories. So focus on those that are going to make you the money, right? And then usually too, if you look at things that haven't been touched in a few years and you say, it's time to, like I just finished cleaning, for example. Cleaning hasn't been touched in a few years. That's, any of the laundry, liquid soaps.
The household goods.
So, yeah. And so you do that every couple of years. You're usually okay. But something like snacks, something like candy, energy bars, tea, coffee, those things need to be looked at every year and sometimes multiple times a year. So, yeah.
Oh, I see. And then, so what, I guess, is this a more of a team effort or the category manager have majority of the say on what decided on the shelf?
What you're talking about is sort of new item selection at that
Yeah,
point.
new item selection, exactly.
And so some retailers will do a new item selection as kind of a round robin where they'll bring a bunch of people in, maybe their peers, but maybe other people that have a passion for the categories or have been buyers in the past or buyers from other departments, like you said, food service.
Oh, okay, I see.
And they'll try these products and give feedback, because a buyer shouldn't buy on their preference. That's one of the really good rules of buying is like, if you buy on your preference, you probably will not have successful journey in category management. They will usually bring their kind of conclusions to their director and say, here's what I'm looking to bring in. Here's what I'm looking to take out. And then they usually finish the review and submit it.
Ah, I see. So I see behind you, I assume those are samples?
They are.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is a very typical retail buyer's office, right? No decoration. It's very simple, a shelf with a lot of samples. I see.
Yeah, there's a whiteboard that has all my projects on it, and then there's samples behind me.
I see. I love that. I love that. Okay, so one very important question. When you are reviewing a new product, I guess maybe depending on category, but let's just say F&B, right? Food and the beverage. And what do you look for in a product? Like, what makes you decide? Like, what are the criteria look for at the beginning?
Yeah. So when you're unpacking a category, you look at usually how the category is performing. So it's kind of, I usually refer to it as you're looking in the mirror. You look at yourself, you look at your category, look at what's doing good, look at what's not doing so good. And then you look outside of yourself. You take a kind of a lens and you take a snapshot of, what the market's looking like, what the trends are looking like. And that's where you begin to then start to make decisions on where you have opportunities to grow. In any given category, between 10 and 20% of that category can go away and no one will miss it. Sometimes you need to get rid of items that don't perform well, and that can be based on actual turns, units per store per week. That could be based on their performance as how they promote, or maybe it's a price point issue, why they're not performing well. So there could be a lot of factors, or maybe their trend is past too. That happens often. So then taking all that information, then you kind of get an idea of how many items you can put into a new reset in any given category. And so then, your question and the question of a lot of people who are watching this is, okay, well then how do I get in?
Yeah.
Well, you're kind of looking then to say, where do I have opportunity gaps? So I always say good buyers should ask the why not question. Why don't I carry this, or why don't I carry this product, right? What am I missing? And there's always opportunities within that space, whether that's an attribute that they're missing, whether that is just plain product that's missing because of a trend that's kind of emerging that we find at maybe a trade show or we see on social media platforms. And then, you're kind of then looking at the position of the category and the pricing of that category relative to your competition to say, am I relevant in that space with these with the items that I have, or do I need to go find items that make me more competitive? So sometimes what we call Me Too items can be something that puts you in a better position because there's what we call demand. There's demand for it out in the market because other retailers have made that item successful. So now you have to carry it, or your customer may go somewhere else to get that product.
I think what you're saying is almost like timing is really important because there's a supply and demand. Maybe you have a great product, but just because this retailer already have something very similar on the shelf that they're not replacing, so you might not get that opportunity. I feel like some brands, like myself, sometimes get really discouraged. Be like, oh, I think we have an amazing product. Why do they not take us in? But like what you're saying is for the retailers, the most important thing is what do I actually need at this moment for this category? And that new product have to fit into that criteria. If it doesn't, even though it's a wonderful product, but might not be for now, might be for later or never.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and when you're looking at a Me Too product, sometimes that's where the tastings come into play. We really should test items, and we should test everything. I'm just encouraging a buyer to try the current product versus their product and give them their honest opinion. Don't lead the witness, but just say, hey, I challenge you to try the two products and let me know what you think.
for a lot of founders, like myself included, I sometimes think taste is everything, right? Especially in F&B, we're like, oh, our product tastes amazing, therefore the buyer will love it. But it's not always the case. So besides it tastes amazing, but what are the other attributes or other things that you think is so important that maybe sometimes founders are like overlooked?
The price, the product, the promotion, and the placement. Like, where is it going to go on the shelf? What's it going to go? And I bring it up because what is it going to go next to? That is like, are you fulfilling a need space, or are you competing against an existing product because you think you're better based on the price, the promotion, and the product, right? So one of those elements have to kind of come into play in order to kind of stir a buyer's thinking that it's time to make a change.
Yeah. So, and so what are the red flags?
Well, it depends on the retailer. It depends on the category to some degree. So it sometimes comes right down to no. Sometimes it's just bad packaging, just straight up bad packaging.
So packaging is very important. That if you have a really crappy packaging, it's not going to capture attention. Okay. So that's one. What are the other ones?
Sometimes taking shortcuts in ingredients, using sub-ingredients of mass production in order to, and then portraying yourself as like, I practically made it in my kitchen and brought it, to your store. If you're going to call yourself a specialty item, or you're going to call yourself a natural item, and you're going to cut corners to get to production, that can sometimes be a no-no for certain retailers. And I'm one of those retailers that I'm pretty picky.
So a clean label, because when I shop, right, because I have 2 young kids, I don't want to buy a product with such a long list of ingredients that I can't even read. Let's move on to the margins. As a founder, right, or as a product you're looking for, we kind of wanted to get the idea, what sort of margin structures do retailers looking for? I know the different category probably have a different like margin requirement, and also different supermarket chain have a different requirement as well. I'm sure there's a rule of thumb for everything. What color requires the highest, percentage of margin? Just give us some general ideas.
I'll tell you, a good buyer will always tell you they'll make as much as they can in any category.
But for a founder, we wanted to give as little as we can, so we have some room for promos.
Most of the founders and most of the people who watch this are not going to get into like the sub 30s. It's just not likely to happen. A sub 30 category, oftentimes like a baby food or a diaper, or, a cleaning, like paper plate, stuff like that. You just, in order to be competitive, you're just not going to make a lot of money on those kind of products. A lot of who are going to watch this are probably in like the sauces or the snacks or, in that kind of a space. And generally speaking, in the sauces, condiments, pantry kind of products, you're usually in about a 40-ish margin. 40 to mid 40s, low 40s, mid 40s. And in a snack or a beverage item, that could be mid to high 40s up to 50, depending on the product. So I'm trying to give you kind of a range. So from a retailer perspective, we're going to hold the carrying cost of that inventory is going to cost us more. So because we're just not going to turn them quick enough. So they need to have a little bit more margin so that when they do go across that register, they sort of had the covering cost of being set and maybe sitting there for more than 60 days.
I see.
Really a good, you're really wanting to turn inventory every 30 days, ideally, in a grocery store.
I see. So how do you know if the product is priced correctly for your customers?
Yeah, this is the one thing that has changed over the years in a big way. You can look at it a couple different ways. Again, if you have comparable items within a category space, you can look at the competitive product in your own space and say, if the average price of a candy bar is $4, if you're coming in at $7, that's going to maybe just cause some concerns. So is it maybe you're too large? Or is it maybe your ingredients are just too, just so much higher than everything else in the category? So as a buyer, then you may take a step back. The pricing rule is somewhat relative to the category, and then also what the trends and what the market will bear.
Next topic is about how to stay on the shelf. So it's difficult to get on the shelf, but that's only half of the equation. It's even more difficult to stay on the shelf, right? What are the in-store lever they can pull in order to drive sales in the store?
Sure. Every retailer is a little different on this. I mean, one of the when you're small and you're scrappy, the best way is demos. Just get out
Yes.
there and get people to try your product and build believers and loyalists to your brand. As you begin to grow and you begin to scale, and you have to use distributors and you're going to other states and stuff like that, that becomes a lot harder for you to do, of course. So then you have to pivot your kind of your funds and your budget towards then just really trying to drive promotional sales and trials and use whatever retailer mechanism they have, whether it's just, whether you start off on as a TPR on a shelf, a temporary price reduction, whether you can get into an ad, whether you can get into a display program. I think a lot of times with a lot of brands, they just want to go right to a display or right to the big ad. And it's like, no, you haven't earned that right yet. There's a lot of there's a lot of brands who never get into an ad, who've been waiting for 5 years, and they just consistently have good turns. They just don't elevate that to that. So be patient, grow, and we want to see the stair step effect of your promos. Like you have a really good promo, you go up, then you're going to come down a little bit. But if you don't come down as far as where you started from, then we know you're gaining more loyalty and you're growing as a brand. And that's really all you want to see in that first year, is the brand get in, stabilize. And really, as a buyer, you just want to see them contribute to the growth of the category.
I feel those are really powerful combination to drive sales at the very beginning. Once you have the momentum, have some, good followings, it's much easier to move that velocity. So important at the beginning to kind of give enough incentive for the consumer to try it. Because once it was there for a while, they're already used to it. They're not curious anymore. But when it first land on the shelf, people are like, oh, what is this? I wanted to try it. So I think that timing is really, really important. And then, so let's say that at the end of this category review, the product has been on the shelf for a year, right? And what kind of metrics do you look for to decide whether this product can stay for the next cycle or maybe consider being replaced? And let's say that you have two products that have similar velocity per dollar. Like, what makes you decide which one stay? I've heard you kind of look at which brand have spent some marketing dollar in the previous year, because at the end of the day, I mean, supermarket is also a business that need to make money. So if this brand is buying end cap displays or ads, means that they are more committed to make this work, right? And you probably want to keep them stay. Is that true or not? Give us some inside scoop.
Yes, somewhat true. I would say there's a couple of things that go into this decision. One is, like I said, are you contributing to the health of the category? So you look at the category average. With inflation the way it's been, I discourage my buyers, and I do the same thing myself. I discourage them looking at dollars. Dollars are always going to be inflated. Really look at unit comparisons year over year. Units are really the tell of the tape. If Mrs. Jones was buying 4 units a year, is she still buying 4 units a year with inflation, or did she go down to 3? And that's a huge factor in certain categories, especially in high dollar categories. It's okay that that you're getting that one sale that's making you a ton of money, but how many times are you getting that sales? What really determines whether you're showing really true profitability. So I look at, I will look at dollars, of course, but I will also look at turns, and I tend to look at turns more. And I imagine most buyers are kind of in that space right now too. And turns is units per store per week.
And
then I usually take the metric of the case pack. So for example, if you're a 6-pack and you are turning 2 units per store per week, it is now going to take me 3 weeks essentially to get through your product before I can turn to another case, right?
Yeah.
Where you get yourself into trouble is if you only turning 1 unit per store per week, that means it's 6 weeks of inventory. Depending on the shelf life of that product, if it's a shorter shelf life, is 6 weeks enough time for me to get out of that product? So good buyers also will look at the shrink. How much are we throwing away, especially in the perishable departments? And I know you're not really perishable, but we may have viewers here who are in the dairy space or what, even the frozen space, or they have short shelf life beverages or whatnot, right? And so you really, as a buyer, you're first looking kind of at that do no harm space to your categories. Like, am I getting through this product in enough times that it sells and we don't throw any away?
Yeah. So
And
for grocery, like a shelf stable products, what is a minimum shelf life before you throw them away or you have to discard them?
everybody's a little different in the pantry space. Usually we want 30 days left
30
on the
days.
product.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you kind of look at it by consumer habits. Like,
Yeah.
how often will a consumer get through the product?
Yeah,
So you don't want
exactly.
you don't want them to buy something that's got 4 days
Or
left on it, put it in
yeah.
their pantry, and then they get it out 20 days later and like, oh, this has been out of code for almost 30 days now.
Yeah.
So that's what the 30-day rule comes into play.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
all that to say is, like, that's an element of it. And then you go to the next phase, which is, okay, if the turns are adequate to the rest of the category, are they contributing? And they're contributing good positive margin growth to the category. How are they promoting, right? Like,
Yeah.
are we seeing them keep pace? Because as a buyers, we can kind of look at what is the category average of promotional rate. If the category average is 20%, for example, is this brand promoting at 20%, or are they promoting more? So give them more credit. So positive of a category review sometimes can be, if you're doing more and you're growing, well, then maybe we need to give you a little more space, or maybe we need to look at some of your line extensions because maybe you're on trend. If you're not promoting, then at that rate is more of a conversation of like, okay, well, you're kind of getting there, but if you're not really, if the average is 20 and you're at 10, we either need you to step up, or we may have to make some tough decisions.
I see.
Depending on
Okay, one last question on this topic. Would you rather to pick a new product from an existing vendor, existing brand, or would you rather go pick a new brand or new vendor that you have not worked with?
Well, somewhat depends on the product, but also depends on how the health of the vendor is to begin with, right? So just to add an extension because somebody slapped their name on it and put it into another category doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be successful if they're not really successful in their own category. It also has to do with adjacency. So like, as you're building kind of things out and you're thinking about, well, displays, and you and I've sort of talked about this before too, is like, if I did a brand display of you, does it make sense, for you to have, your own sparkling tea wouldn't make sense in the Hot Pot Queen because you're more a pantry. You do other things, right?
Yeah.
So do the adjacencies of what you're trying to do make sense to your overall brand that you're trying to build? That also does come into play a little bit. So yes, if all that adds up, yes, I'm more apt to extend a brand if they're performing really well than to bring in a new brand, because a new brand comes with a lot more risks, especially if they have no traction within your market.
All right. So closing question, if you could give one piece of advice to a new founder entering retail for the very first time, what would that be?
Make sure you know who you're talking to. I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice.
Like the right person, talking to the right buyer.
Like, what they are. A good buyer will say, have you ever been in my stores? Have you ever shopped in my stores? Right? One of the single biggest mistakes they can make is when they come in and do presentations and they say, well, I'm in Erewhon and I'm doing 100 units a week. I don't care. Erewhon is, I love Erewhon. Don't get me wrong. And I do use Erewhon as a bellwether for maybe where trends are going to go. But they have no relevance to me. Just like if somebody came down to Erewhon and said, I'm in Town and Country and I sell 200 units a week. They're like, I don't care. Right? So know who your retailer is.
Yeah.
And then don't go in there, trying to tell the retailer, you're going to be better because of me, because I know I'm better somewhere else. Like, that doesn't really work. That kind of falls on deaf ears. So if we want to know how you're performing, the buyer will ask you, okay, what other retailers are you in? How are you performing? That's your lead in to then tell me how wonderful you're doing in another retailer. If you want to pitch to Town and Country, go in and visit a Town and Country. If you don't have someone, get somebody to go in there. If you have a broker or distributor, get somebody to give you a little intel on okay, who are they? What do they sell? Give me pictures of their sets so I can kind of know what they look like, right? Go in and know who you're talking to. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
That's really awesome. And thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for sharing your experience and bring, such honesty into the conversation. I think every person who's watching this episode today can walk away with something that they can use tomorrow. So
hopefully.
yeah, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
for everyone who thinking this podcast is very helpful, please make sure you subscribe. And I have more founder to founder insights and all that great information about the CPG industry coming every Wednesday. So I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.